Well, the world food crisis can be summarized in the fact that there are today 963 million people who are hungry. This is unacceptable. Almost 1 billion hungry people out of a population of 6.5 million today. Our objective is to eradicate totally hunger from the face of the earth by the year 2025. The first challenge is to ensure that these 1 billion people get access to food and have the most basic of human right, which is the right to exist. And you don't exist if you don't eat, and you don't have your biological integrity if you do not eat adequately. And the second challenge is that we are in a world where the population will increase to 9 billion by the year 2050. And as a consequence, we need to double the present world food production in a sustainable way. Well, first, there are problems that are international, there are problems that are national, and there are problems that are local. When you discuss about international trade, that's not a local issue. Under which condition are agricultural commodities exchanged, with what type of tariffs, with what type of subsidies, what are the impact on competitivity of one commodity against the other. That's truly international, cannot be solved locally. When you're talking about transboundary pests and disease, like, for example, avian influenza or other diseases, these are not respecting any boundaries. Unless you have regional programs, international programs to address those issues, you will not find a solution. And there are issues also of food quality and food safety. The standards have to be international. But as one of my teachers used to say, agriculture is the science of local conditions. You know, what you do in a given area, if you go 1 kilometer away, the soils are not the same anymore. The microclimate is not the same. The ownership of the land is not the same, etc. Therefore, you need to get what we call a territorial approach, a local approach to the issues, in particular when they relate to productivity, to production, to varieties, to impact on biodiversity, impact on different factors. So these are the parts that have to be done locally. But the research also has to be done nationally and internationally. Here in Brazil, you have Embrapa. Other countries have their own national research system. In a global environment, we have the network of international agricultural research systems working with national agricultural research systems. And then you have the whole question of setting the necessary institutions of transfer of technology, institution to ensure access to inputs, to ensure credit, to ensure that the products that are provided by small farmers are bought, that they have adequate price, that their market is guaranteed, and not to talk of what needs to be done in also helping schools with school feeding programs so that children can get access to meals twice a day. There are all those potentials that have to be exploited to address the problem of food security at international, national, and local level. First, the priorities today of poor countries are water control, If I take Africa, where we have the continent where production per capita has gone down over the last 20 years, where there are around 24-25% of the population which is undernourished, only 4% of the arable land is irrigated. Again, 30% in 28, to be more precise, in Asia. The second problem is to build storage facilities. Africa and the developing countries in general are losing up to 60% of their production in some commodities for lack of adequate storage. We have to build also the rural roads. Because you have seen that even to provide food aid in some cases, we are obliged to send it by parachute because we have no road to take it to the people. So how can those people be able to get the inputs for increasing their production or get their product to the market? And naturally adequate animal feed for the animals and naturally for aquaculture. These are the priorities. We should revisit all the mechanisms of governance of food security to try to adopt the proper institutions and give them the necessary mandate to do their job properly and in a coordinated and integrated way. We need also to ensure that farmers in the world, be they from developed or developing countries, are able to get an income that is comparable to that of workers in the secondary and tertiary sector. If not, why would they stay there? And yet we need the farmers because we need to double world food production. But we should be able to do it in a way that is not distorting the market to the detriment of poor countries. And naturally, we need an early reaction system because we did the early warning without any results because the mechanisms were not there. And we need also to mobilize the resources to invest in rural infrastructure in particular and access to inputs for those 1 billion hungry people around the world so that they can produce food on their own and be independent of other forms of assistance. We organized a first summit in 1996. This was the first time heads of state and government of the world were meeting to discuss a problem so fundamental as the food security of the world. We adopted an objective of cutting by half the number of hungry people by the year 2015. We adopted a plan of action on how to do it. And by 2002 already, I was obliged to call a second summit to say we're going in the wrong direction. Instead of increasing investment, the investment is going down. It was a question of allocation of resources to achieve the goal. Instead of achieving the goal set for 2015, if we continue the way we are doing, we'll achieve it in 2150. We had indicated that we were running the risk of a crisis in the world. As we didn't take any action, the crisis came, and you have seen riots in 22 countries around the world. A number of people died, a number were injured. We saw also a government toppled in Haiti and in other countries. If it had not been urgent measures to try to address the situation, we would have had even more serious situation. Therefore, it's clear now that the problem of food insecurity is not only an economic, social, and ethical problem, but it's a problem of peace and security in the world.